It's the Israel Brief brought to you by Lay of the Land. I'm Rolene Marks, bringing you those top stories making headlines every Monday to Thursday. And as you know, we do it on a variety of different platforms, so stay tuned for those details. But first, let's take a look at those top stories. And what can I say? In Israel, we love democracy so much, we are doing it for the fifth time in 3.5 years. What am I talking about, you are asking? Well, let's get to it. Last night, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and Prime Minister Naftali Bennett announced that after trying their absolute best to hold the coalition government together, they will now be dissolving it. In a joint press conference to the Israeli public that has been dubbed extremely dignified, the foreign minister and the prime minister stated that, there have to be a government of unity. They had given it their best, but unfortunately, despite every effort, Israel will be moving to dissolve its Knesset, its parliament, its coalition, and we will move to elections in the near future. We don't have a confirmed date for it, but it is expected that it could possibly be at the end of October due to legal issues that still need to be ironed out, as well as the upcoming Chagim, or Jewish holidays. So what has led to this moment? There have been a series of defections from the coalition through to the opposition, and unfortunately not enough to keep the coalition together. So what will happen now is a bill to dissolve the Knesset, which will be tabled for the Knesset session tomorrow and is expected to pass by next Wednesday, means that the coalition as it stands now will be dissolved. The Prime Minister will step down and Foreign Minister Yair Lapid will serve as both interim Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. Now, there are many out there thinking, does this mean that it could be a comeback for Bibi Netanyahu, the former Prime Minister? Is he the Teflon King? Well, in an interesting twist today, two lawmakers put forward a proposal to pass legislation along with the dissolution of the Knesset that could make it possible for any lawmaker who is facing criminal charges to not be allowed to be Prime Minister. As many of you know, Prime Minister, or the former Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, is facing a whole series of criminal woes with criminal charges being brought against him. So this could mean that if this is passed, he will not be able to run or be Prime Minister, which could mean that the Likud party would have to go to primaries to decide on their list. As we say here in Israel, never a dull moment, and early polls have the predicted outcome as no clear majority for either the opposition as it currently stands or the coalition as it currently stands. And of course, if you are familiar with the Israeli electoral system, you'll know that it's based on proportional representation, and it doesn't matter who necessarily wins, it is who can form a government. Meanwhile, lasting just barely over a year, Israel's coalition government was made up of parties from the far left to the right, and is largely seen as Israel's most inclusive government that has ever been in existence. Well, let's see what the next round of elections bring. But a lot of disgruntled Israelis today saying that there is no need to spend this amount of money on having to go to elections. Some are elated, saying that it is about time the coalition government comes to an end. But the only results that will count will be the results in those much needed ballots. So get your voting on Israel, because we're headed back to the polls. The US Ambassador to Israel, Thomas Nides, has announced that President Biden's scheduled visit to Israel, which will take place on the 14th and 15th of July, will take place as scheduled. The president will be welcomed by then interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Benny Gantz has confirmed that Israel is forming a Middle East air defense alliance led by the United States, and this is as countries form alliances to square off against a possible nuclear Iran. In other news, a Palestinian is reported to have handed himself in to police at a police station very close to the Temple Mount. The 37-year-old Palestinian, armed with a knife, had intended to carry out a stabbing attack against Israelis, but had regretted his decision and had handed himself in. He will be appearing before a Jerusalem court later today. And finally, we always try and end these reports with some good news. Our Interior Minister, Ayelet Shaked, is headed to Morocco. She will be the fourth Israeli minister to do so ever since the signing of the Abraham Accords. The minister will discuss, amongst many things, possibly bringing Moroccans to work in Israel in the construction and the nursing sectors, as well as ways to cooperate further on the protection of personal data. And we hope that no matter the outcome of the upcoming elections, that our Abraham Accords will continue to grow. So that brings us to the end of the headlines, but don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook page is at Lottel Site. Our community is growing. If you're not already a part of it, please consider liking us or following us, and don't forget to help us get past those Facebook censors by sharing our content. Our YouTube channel is at the Israel Brief. If you are watching this via YouTube, please give us a like, a share, subscribe to our channel, because that way we get more people hearing the news from Israel. And our Twitter handle is at Lay of the Land with the digit 5. That's at Lay of the Land 5. Follow us, interact with us, and of course, please share our content. So all that remains for me to say is thank you for watching. I'm Rolene Marks. Let the election race begin, and I'll be back with tomorrow's top stories right here on the Israel Brief.